Have you ever felt your heart pound knowing you need to speak up in a work meeting, but the fear of saying the wrong thing or maybe sounding impolite just silences you?
Hmm.
Or worse, you speak and then later you're wondering, did I accidentally offend someone? When all you wanted was just to be professional.
Yeah, that's a really common feeling.
It feels like the hidden rules of English office conversations can be a total minefield for anyone, really, but especially if it's not your first language. Welcome